I've played a lot of games in my life across just about every format you can imagine: 2D, 3D, over RF, AV, S-video, even RGB, and one of the visual styles that's always stood out to me as uniquely strange and fascinating is FMV. Full motion video was this brief, wildly ambitious era where developers leaned on digital actors and pre-recorded footage, trying to inject realism and cinematic immersion into games long before the hardware was truly ready for it. Now, a while back, one of our epic firefighters, Moo, asked for a video breaking down my top 10 favorite FMV games. And honestly, that's a request I've been sitting on for a bit, because FMV is messy, experimental, and sometimes downright ridiculous, but when it works, it really works. So today we're diving into the best FMV games I've played to date. Maybe you'll see one you love, one you forgot that existed, or one that you've never touched but now absolutely will. Let's begin. Well, you knew we were going to have at least one Sierra game on this list. I know someone in the community is already smiling about that, but yeah, we're starting with a game a lot of people wanted to see here, a continuation of the Gabriel Knight franchise. The first game, Gabriel Knight: Sins of the Fathers, was your classic point-and-click adventure where we played as Gabriel Knight, a Schattenjäger, or Shadow Hunter, which in practice just means a guy who goes completely balls deep into supernatural buffoonery at the direct expense of his own sanity, and somehow that's a paying job. The Beast Within picks that story up, but Sierra decided that it's time to get more modern, so instead of sprites, we get full-on FMV, real actors, real locations, real people inside the game, right in the middle of that mid-90s digital actor movement I was talking about earlier, where everyone thought this was the future and absolutely nothing weird would come out of it. Boy, were they wrong. This time around, though, we're playing as both Gabriel and Grace, investigating a string of murders tied to old werewolf legends in Bavaria. Castles, forests, ancient journals, bloodlines, accents that wander off and come back later. And honestly, that's the whole plot. You're hunting werewolves in Germany, and the game fully commits to the slow burn. Characters talk, argue, dump history straight into your lap, and the game makes zero effort to rush you. It expects you to pay attention or get left behind, and that's why this one matters. The Beast Within wasn't trying to be campy FMV or ironic FMV, it was trying to be respectable FMV, a little smug, a little self-important, but confident enough to pull it off.
Trouble.
I'm in trouble, and I need your help.
Then I made my first mistake. I said I'd listen.
Growing up, I was always a fan of American laser games. Their stuff just looked cool to me. Live-action movies that you could actually shoot at? You have to understand, my arcade era was already past the Laserdisc boom. When I was hitting arcades, light gun games meant Time Crisis, House of the Dead, Crisis Zone, maybe Silent Scope if I was lucky, and of course Virtua Cop if some random arcade hadn't updated their cabinets since the Clinton administration. So I completely missed the Laserdisc era in real time. As an adult, I started digging into that history and realized American laser games had a ridiculous catalog. Cops, space pirates, bounty hunters, crime dramas, all FMV and all wildly aggressive. And the one that kept popping up everywhere was Who Shot Johnny Rock, especially the 3DO version. Every retro shop, every online listing, there it was, staring back at me. So eventually I said screw it, got an emulator running that could handle Laserdisc games, and cowabunga, I was in. Who Shot Johnny Rock is straight up Nor chaos. You play as a detective dropped into what feels like an active war zone disguised as a city. The plot technically revolves around tracking down who shot the titular Johnny Rock, but honestly that question becomes secondary almost immediately because every level is just relentless gun violence. Alleyways, warehouses, nightclubs, rooftops, everywhere you go, someone is pulling a gun on you with zero hesitation. It feels less like solving a crime and more like surviving Fallujah levels of criminal activity. Suspects draw on you mid-sentence. Civilians suddenly aren't civilians, and the game expects instant judgment with no mercy for hesitation. Miss a cue, and you're dead. Get it right, and the story lurches forward whether you fully processed it or not. It's loud, fast, unfair, and completely unapologetic. And once I fully experienced it, it made total sense why American laser games had such a cult following.
Let's kick some butt. Everybody freeze!
Keeping on the topic of American laser games, Crime Patrol is easily one of the most hilariously absurd shooters I have ever played. This game throws subtlety straight out the window and replaces it with non-stop aggression. You play as a police officer dropped into what feels like the most crime-infested city ever conceived, where every single location, convenience stores, warehouses, apartment buildings, parking garages, is apparently staffed exclusively by armed lunatics who are itching to die in a hail of FMV gunfire. The plot barely pretends to exist beyond crime is happening everywhere all the time, and your job is to respond instantly, identify suspects on the fly, and shoot first with zero room for doubt. Civilians and criminals are framed just ambiguously enough to make you hesitate, and the game absolutely punishes that hesitation like it's a personal failing. Suspects scream at you, lunge towards the camera, pull weapons mid-sentence, and occasionally look guilty just for existing. It's so over the top that it stops feeling like law enforcement and starts feeling like you've dropped into a parody of 80s and early 90s cop movies where escalation is the only rule. As with all American laser games, Crime Patrol is unapologetic. It doesn't care about realism, balance, or fairness. It wants panic. It wants that split-second judgment. And it wants you to feel like every wrong decision is your fault personally. It's ridiculous, loud, borderline unhinged, and somehow still incredibly compelling, which is peak American laser games energy. You go from a street cop to Delta Force. Yeah, that Delta Force. Zhadnost, the People's Party on the 3DO, is one of the strangest tonal whiplashes I've ever experienced in FMV, because on paper, this thing is a game show. Straight up, you're participating in a fictional authoritarian state's televised competition made up of several simple contests all wrapped in FMV. Contestants, hosts, judges, cutscenes, the whole production. And on the surface, it almost feels playful. Bright lights, structured rounds, rules being explained to you like this is some off-brand Eastern Bloc Price is Right, but the longer you play, the more uncomfortable it gets, because every single element of this game show is soaked in propaganda and quiet menace. The host smiles too much. The contestants feel rehearsed. The questions and challenges aren't about skill as much as they are loyalty, obedience, and saying the correct thing at the correct time. You're not trying to win prizes, you're trying to not embarrass yourself in front of the state. The FMV acting is stiff, but it works perfectly here because everyone feels like they're performing under threat, like the cameras never turn off and someone is always taking notes. The contests themselves are simple, almost trivial, but the surrounding context makes every decision feel heavier than it should because you're constantly wondering what the wrong answer implies. What makes Zhadnost stick with me is how it uses the harmless structure of a game show to sell authoritarian dread. It's not loud and it's not shocking, it's just quietly letting you realize that this entire production exists to remind you who's in control. And that's way more unsettling than any jump scare.
Those bandits fisted my asshole at bearing 12, 9er, 3.
Sewer Shark is pure sega-cd energy, but not because it's some loose anarchic free-for-all, it's because it's aggressively staged, aggressively acted, and absolutely obsessed with selling you a cinematic future that barely existed yet. Sewer Shark takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where environmental collapse forced humanity underground. You're not just some random pilot, you're a rookie sewer jockey, part of a specialized unit tasked with keeping the massive underground tunnel systems clear so Solar City, an island paradise on the surface, can continue pretending everything is fine. From the jump, the game frames itself like a militarized FMV briefing tape that never shuts the fuck up. Your co-pilot, Ghost, is constantly evaluating your performance, barking orders and commentary like this is a live fire exercise instead of a rail shooter. Catfish, the small scout drone, handles navigation, calling out turns with zero patience for hesitation. If you miss a direction, the game doesn't just punish you mechanically, it straight up fucking kills you, which is very much the sega-cd vibe. Over time, the narrative pushes beyond simple tunnel clearing. You meet Falco, another sewer jockey who believes there's a hidden route back to the surface, a truth the system doesn't want exposed. That's when the real villain steps into focus. Commissioner Stenchler, ruling from Solar City, openly corrupt, openly sadistic, and fully willing to mutate dissenters into mindless sewer creatures to maintain control. Sewer Shark didn't age gracefully, but it succeeded at exactly what it was built to do: sell the sega-cd fantasy of full screen, full motion action with attitude, and whether that fantasy holds up today or not, back then, it felt like the future screaming at you through a grainy video feed. Fahrenheit on the sega-cd is one of those games that feels weirdly ambitious in hindsight, because instead of lasers, monsters, or gunfights, it decides you're going to be a firefighter, and not the heroic movie version either. You play as a firefighter responding to a series of escalating emergencies, apartment fires, industrial accidents, chemical disasters, and the game treats them like actual crises instead of set pieces. You're watching FMV footage of buildings burning, people panicking, structures collapsing, and your role is to make decisions on the fly, where to send your crews, where to walk, when to pull out, which risks are worth taking and which ones aren't. And the game does not protect your feelings. People can die, aka you can die. Firefighters can get injured or killed, buildings can be lost entirely, and the story isn't some grand narrative arc as much as a mounting sense of pressure where every scenario feels worse than the last, and you're constantly juggling limited resources against impossible situations. What makes Fahrenheit stand out is how clinical it feels. The FMV isn't flashy, it's observational, almost documentary-like, forcing you to sit with the consequence of your calls instead of celebrating them. For a Sega CD and Sega CD 32X title, that was a wild direction to take, and it showed that FMV didn't always have to be about spectacle or shock. Sometimes it was about putting you in charge and letting you live with the outcome, which honestly makes it one of the most quietly stressful games on the system. Phantasmagoria. That's the point where FMV stopped pretending to be polite and just decided to traumatize an entire generation. This is Roberta Williams going completely off the leash, taking Sierra's adventure game DNA and stuffing it into a 7-disc horror movie that absolutely refuses to blink, look away, or ask if you're okay. You play as Adrienne Delaney, who moves into a massive, ominous mansion with her husband Don, which is already a bad decision because nothing good has ever happened in a giant house that looks like it was built exclusively to murder people. For a while, the game plays the long game, right? Creepy rooms, unsettling history, doors that feel like they should legally require a waiver to open, and that constant sense that something is deeply wrong here. And then the game just keeps escalating. Possession, violence, graphic murder scenes that were genuinely shocking for the mid-90s, and FMV sequences that linger so long you start wondering if the developers just left the camera running out of spite. You're still doing classic adventure game stuff, wandering around, solving puzzles, poking items you should definitely not be touching, but now it's all wrapped in footage that doesn't cut away when things get ugly. That's the kicker. You can't mentally soften this like pixel art. You can't go, oh yes, abstract violence. No, you have to sit there and watch it happen. On your beige PC monitor at 2 in the morning, questioning every life choice that led you here. Phantasmagoria mattered because it proved FMV could carry full-scale horror without hiding behind camp or irony. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't even tasteful, and it definitely wasn't approved by anyone's parents. But it committed harder than almost everything else in the genre. Love it or hate it, this was FMV looking you dead in the eye and saying, you paid for all 7 discs, you're gonna fucking use all 7 discs. Got it? Cool. We just talked about Phantasmagoria, so it's time to talk about Phantasmagoria 2. Now, this one isn't known as Phantasmagoria 2 colloquially, it's known as Puzzle of Flesh. Puzzle of Flesh is one of those FMV games that makes you feel like you accidentally opened up someone else's therapy journal and now it's legally your problem. The game centers on a man named Jonathan, who survives a traumatic accident and a horrible upbringing and then spirals into a psychological breakdown that plays out through fragmented memories, disturbing hallucinations, and interactions that never quite feel right. You're not running around shooting anything or even saving the day, you're piecing together what actually happened, what Jonathan remembers happening, and what his brain has very aggressively decided to rewrite to protect himself. The FMV footage leans hard into close-ups, long silences, and faces that linger in frame just long enough to make you uncomfortable, like the game is waiting to see if you're going to look away first. Conversations feel awkward, intimate, and invasive, and the story slowly unravels into themes of identity, repression, and trauma that are way heavier than you expect going in. This is not fun horror. This is the kind of horror where you finish a session and you just kind of like stare at your desktop for a minute like, okay, cool. I'm done being perceived today. What makes Puzzle of Flesh matter is that it uses FMV to trap you inside someone else's mental state. You can't distance yourself with sprites or abstraction, you're stuck watching a real person fall apart in real time. It's unsettling, it's exhausting, and it absolutely earns its reputation as one of the most psychologically intense FMV games ever made, even if it feels like it should come with a complimentary couch and a licensed professional afterward. Oh shit, Mad Dog McCree, what's up? This one's a blast from the past for me. Growing up, we were poor. We didn't eat poor, but definitely not cutting edge technology poor either. You know the kid down the street with a Super Nintendo? The guy at school with a $1,000 PC playing all the insane games? Yeah, that wasn't me. I was rocking a Windows 98 Tinker project my dad put together, and honestly, I loved that thing. One of the games I played constantly was the DOS version of Mad Dog McCree, which was the first live-action Laserdisc game I had ever encountered, and as far as I know, it was the first thing American Laser Games ever made. The plot is pure Western nonsense in the best way. You roll into town as a nameless gunslinger, immediately find out the place is run by Mad Dog McCree and his gang, and from that point on, it's basically a shooting gallery where every doorway, staircase, and saloon window exists solely to spawn another outlaw who wants you dead. There's no subtlety here. Bad guy pops out, threaten you with cartoon villain energy, draw their guns in slow motion, and if you hesitate for even a second, congrats, you're dead. You rescue townfolk, you clear out buildings, chase Mad Dog through town, and eventually gun him down in the most dramatic showdown possible. As a kid, the idea that I could play a Western movie like that felt unreal. Even the DOS version kicked ass and held up shockingly well. I will say, for the sake of honesty and historical record, the sega-cd version is absolute fucking hot dog water, so don't play it. It sucks. For years, I played horror games. I played NES games and honestly never put much thought into who was creating these experiences. I only cared about them on a surface level. Was it fun? Was it scary? Did it slap? That was the whole metric. Then I started digging into soundtracks for YouTube videos. Some of you probably remember stuff like my NES Best Soundtracks episode, and that's when I really started paying attention. That's when I learned about the absolute cosmic magnificence of Tim Follin. Yeah, it's been a minute since we talked about him. Tim made a ridiculous number of legendary soundtracks and basically treated every sound driver he touched like it was his personal bitch. Solstice, Plock, Silver Surfer, the man was doing black magic on hardware that had no business sounding that good. I could make an entire video just tracing his evolution from the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum days to now, and honestly, if y'all want to see it, let me know in the comment section below. But the important part here is that once Tim broke away and went freelance, he formed his own studio, Baggy Cat Limited. One of the things that came out of that was At Dead of Night. At Dead of Night drops you into this creepy, isolated hotel where you're trapped overnight with a violent, unstable man named Jimmy who is actively hunting you through the building. You navigate the hotel in first person, sneaking through hallways, hiding in rooms, listening for footsteps, and trying not to make noise while Jimmy patrols like a slasher villain who actually knows the layout. The plot unfolds as you use a spirit box to communicate with the ghosts of former guests, interviewing them one by one to piece together what happened in the hotel and how Jimmy became what he is and why this place feels so wrong. And the thing that makes it work is that none of this is rushed. The tension comes from movement, sound, and anticipation, not jump scares. Jimmy doesn't just show up in cutscenes, he is there, reacting to your actions in real time, which makes every hallway feel unsafe and every mistake feel earned. All of that atmosphere, all of that restraint, all of that understanding of how sound and silence mess with your nerves feels like the natural evolution of everything Tim Follin had been mastering for decades. This isn't just a horror game with good music, it's the culmination of a career built on tension, finally given full control over the experience. And that's it for today's episode. What did you think of this list? What are your favorite FMV games from your childhood? Feel free to let the community know down in the comments section below. Speaking of our community, if you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home with us. We're a gathering of video game enthusiasts that love to remember when life was just a little bit easier to live. And if you align with that, feel free to subscribe. Finally, the single most important thing you can do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly affects the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortefyre out.